going on, guys? This is going to be day 9 of diving deeper on my trades that I took for the day, and these are kind of just the same general trades that I've been taking for the week. And yeah, so let's get into it. Um, Schwab was a short. Schwab was a short because of why? Well, we had relative weakness in JPM that we did talk about for like a couple weeks back here, and then the setup just took a long time to really start playing out. We had this really strong seller dominance candle. We also had a little bit of a bearish volume pattern case scenario here where you're gapping down on really heavy volume, and then obviously this was repurchased a little bit lower, not quite into this retest or any really true constructive retest, not even any super relevant gap, and then it started climbing its way higher, and then it flagged out low volume, and then pushed its way higher into a new all-time high, although it did fail that all-time high. So, whenever we look at these spots and we start finding the failure, start finding the lower highs, everything like that, and you start finding the really low volume pushes back into the heavy volume seller candle, then it's like, okay, we could start potentially looking for weakness within financials. Schwab was a really clean name that also had very clean, similar structure, but it just felt like it had a little bit more of like a actionable risk and execution level, which would have been above this high, right? So that's like a little new higher high within the flag, where you'd get your failure in the midst of a bear gap. And I was more or less just looking for this to potentially fill, come back down, break beneath this spot. It was either going to look like something that looks like this or something that looks like this, which two little criterias here are just really not much different. And I bought some time here, and I also bought some weeklies. So the weeklies I took down pretty far because I didn't have a lot of size on them, and I was thinking this could be an outsized win. What I'm ideally targeting over here would be like the $72 level. So if I can get that with my heavier time short, which is already green, I've already realized a lot, then that's cool. But if not, then it is what it is. So that was the Schwab short. There wasn't anything too special about it. When I was looking at this live, it was kind of just a failure on heavier volume. Um, with the heaviest volume candle of the day, and the 15 started looking like a strong base beneath, and then we started to get this diminishing spread little candle over here for the lower high. I executed here and risked this high, and bought some time into the open over here, as we pushed up above here, and my risk was going to be like 75.27 or like 75 flat. This was also the 75 psych that I was buying off of as well. So yeah, I didn't want to miss the trade, so I took a little trade over here, and this is kind of what my risk to reward calculator looked like. It was probably something like this. Down into the overnight gap fill on the weeklies, I realized some down there. That's already a 3.75 to 1 R, and then obviously even lower down into like this previous support or down into this gap is like you're looking at almost a 8R trade. So it's a really nice trade. 8R is obviously something where you're not going to scale the full trade at that 8R, and it's very difficult to do so unless you start seeing the overall basket getting relatively weak. Google was a false breakout that I talked about for a very long time too. We had a really nice move on that short once again. Higher time frame. I've been holding this a little bit longer, but that's been a really nice one. I really like to talk about how this got like a really good gap up. And then after that gap up, we started to sell off a little bit early into that gap up. We created this really strong gap beneath, and then obviously a 2 day series of bleeding afterwards. And then we started to finally find a stronger buy off of like 163 with these 3 consecutive daily lows, all kind of basing within this spot. We got some bearish news. It was reaccumulated, went to a new high, and then we started to distribute with not necessarily seller dominant volume patterns, but it more or less just looked like a buyer was effortlessly moving this thing higher on little to no consolidation. If you want to go to the hourly, you could even see that. And whenever you guys do see this, and then you start finding a seller stepping in above the earnings candle into price discovery, and it starts looking like you're putting in lower highs, you're failing, you're getting early morning capitulation with heavier volume, thick spreads behind them, and you're getting these strong sell side days, then typically what was happening here was buy sell side liquidity wasn't really filtering throughout the name very strongly. Over here, it was more or less just moving its way higher with little to no sellers in sight, and then when you start finding that seller, boom, you get a higher low, and then that higher low is off the golden pocket. You push your ways higher. This is now a new price discovery again up here, and the secondary one is even better because what do we notice about this one? This is the fresh first higher low within this whole entire little trend over here. So it's a little bit improbable to be shorting this down here, shorting the whole over here. It's better to be shorting this three inside bar series over here for the expansion downwards, maybe into like discount or the golden pocket, which would be here and here. And then obviously scaling into the weakness that you find down there in those spots because that could be where a higher time frame, higher lows from. And then we started building out like just a weaker rally into like a stronger sell side day. We push our ways lower, we find a higher low again, we try to push higher, and then as we push higher, it's off the CPI report, except we get the sweep, and then we get failures of this previous resistance that failed and then turned into a resistance, right? So that would be where the heavier time frame stop would be like this little hourly spot of resistance potentially trying to turn support, but we failed it and then we started to retest it into close. So that was the spot in which I was looking for another lower high. We find the lower high. You could take low to high here. It's basically discount, and then you get your gap down. That gap down led to what do we have to work with now? Well, we have a couple spots. When you're looking at this from like a simple lower high and then move lower, it makes a lot of sense. But the thing that I was really looking at the whole entire time on Google was the CPI bear gap that we actually lost, right? So this was something that we lost and we retested into, we based there. So the CPI bear gap is this, guys, or bull gap, I'm sorry. So whenever you lose these spots and it looks like seller dominance, and then you go to retest upper ranges of that to either reclaim or fail for another lower high, these are going to be the prominent areas to start looking for those opportunities. So I shorted heavier time like further out a little bit over here and up here. And then obviously that almost went back to break even over there, but it was only runners and I realized most here before FOMC. And then we led into the new week. I still had some of the trade over here. And then it's doing really well. I'm going to try, like I said, I'm going to try with my other trade to get something that looks like if we can get it, it would be a break, a base under the earnings candle, and then a move lower, likely going to be lower into like, oh man, I would probably have to say this range over here. So like 173.80 down into like 173 is the spot in which I'd be looking a little bit more for like a confident move down. And then we shorted Tesla. I shorted Tesla for 100% today. A couple things I want to talk about with Tesla. First of all, this is a gap up, right? It's a gap up, but where's the gap up to, guys? It's obviously coming off of pre-market right off the open, and it's into this spot where a seller's been building and building and building for quite some time. We have a daily high right over here within the midst of this little gap that's been protected, but that's not even really like what I'm totally looking for. It's more or less just the bottom of the gap that ties in with confluence to like this day's low, which is a very heavy volume candle. And typically, whenever you look at these very heavy volume candles, guys, their highs and lows are going to be respected. So if this is the low where buyers push this thing up, this was the low, the high was up here. Um, Sellers would ideally want this to stay beneath that low. If it gets beneath it and stays beneath it, so that's just one thing that I really wanted to emphasize over there. Another thing that I really like to talk about is like just levels being retested before we move higher. And I just had this little simple like 182 strong daily level. If you go into the hourly, you could also see it. So just right over here. So what we never really did was we kind of did, but we but it looked weak after retesting it. So I figured we're probably gonna have to see one more little leg lower into the towards the end of the day, the close. And this was where my risk to reward criteria was. I had weeklies and I had bi-weeklies on this one, but um, it was just a profit roll with what I was up for the day. I put everything I was in up for the day on this one on the weeklies, and then I had a little bit more with the bi-weeklies. And this was just a quick little, what I was doing was kind of realizing this was beneath that level, pushing into it and failing it. This is also the 185 area. So whenever I started to see this failure, um, and a failure also of like pre-market low spots right over here, this pre-market support, I was like, you know what, this is probably going to bleed a little bit lower into this level that makes a lot of sense to really retest. So that's what I was looking for. I would honestly expect Tesla to sell a little bit more given the fact of how this candle looks. And I'd be looking for this to pull back a little bit more into this gap that we have now established, right? So we're going to see how that one works, but that's just kind of how the Tesla chart went. That's kind of how I've been looking at some of these charts. Really wasn't anything else that I really wanted to trade. I talked about Netflix being a really nice short side trade this day, just given the fact that, or no, I'm sorry. It was a little bit lower, but I'm not even going to talk about that. There's nothing else that was really on the radar. Um, One thing that I did kind of like was SMCI, but I'm not a big fan of trading this one. So yeah, it was a little bit of a boring day for me. But yeah, this was a really nice one over here. Really wasn't a very vulnerable trade opportunity on that one. Um, and then I was looking at this little range over here on SPY. It just looked like a 3 or 4 lower low sell climax into like a little wedge pop that was looking to at least pop into this high, and then if it reclaimed and obviously pushed above that high, I would obviously be looking for like near the upper ranges of the day, which is also in a gap. Overnight gaps mean a lot, especially just retesting them and uh, price facilitating from one lower range of the day to one higher range of the day. And that's kind of the case over here. So, yeah, I'm gonna, some interesting shit going on here with SPY on the really low volume, throughout the day, and then the stronger volume into the close towards the top of that day. So we're gonna see what goes on over here. Tech relatively dead. Everything's relatively dead. I did swing some lottos on AFRM, some call lottos just because of the really heavy volume pops and how long of a consolidation this has really been. A sloping, in my opinion, a sloping reaccumulation that's been going on for weeks and months on end. So I'm going to be having this one on the focus list just for the future. But yeah, we're getting really heavy volume anomalies and gap ups over here. So I'm really interested to see how this one plays out for the weekly candle closure. The weekly print doesn't look the hottest, right? So whenever I look at this and I start speculating to myself, I start thinking, oh my gosh, okay, likely they're going to want to push this up given the fact that the previous weeks were really dry volume. We're covering a lot of this weekly imbalanced spread. And it just looks like one massive like inverse head and shoulders reaccumulation down here potential. So I'm really interested to see how this one moves for the future. I mean, I don't really care about my lottos. It would be nice if they would hit, but like I'm not like I'm not like gonna cry if they don't, you know? Like I'm trading responsibly, so that was the 3 trades for today. As far as focus for tomorrow, oh man, I think there's a lot of weekly prints that are very, very crucial within the overall market for us to be able to find like a really solid trade. Um, I'm gonna still have my eyes on this Google focus over on this little Google setup over here. I think it could be really nice underneath the earnings candle. I don't know if it's necessarily going to get there, but do think this is like a smaller phase of distribution that has a little bit more room down, maybe beneath this little low over here. I don't know. If I could catch $3 more on runners, that would be awesome. That would almost be like hitting on on a different full size trade. And that's the power of runners, guys. One thing that I do have to say about runners is trading with the higher time frames in the 15 and the hourly and just really zoning in on where your spots need to be protected for the trade to stay valid and holding until there's a very respectable until there's a really respectable like target that you need to take um, then then yeah, I mean that's that's kind of how your runners are going to make yourself a whole nother trade. Um, so yeah, that's that. If we want to go over to, I mean, I could look through a couple stocks that I do find a little bit interesting, but there's nothing that's like too crazy. Um, obviously, solar I think needs a little bit of time. I am interested in like HD here pretty soon, but not quite yet. We're gonna see how this one kind of plays out on like the weekly, I think, before I think about taking any sort of entry. And yeah, this week's just been a little bit. It's just I'm probably gonna look for a reshort opportunity just one more time on JP Morgan because this isn't the strongest daily candle, and when you go in and you look at the hourly, what it ultimately looks like, guys, is kind of just small relief off of this massive sell candle that's very alarming. So worst case scenario, I take a short on something into like the 195 area on next week expiry for like an intraday trade. If it doesn't work, I'm probably just going to relax and call it a smaller week. If it does work on top of AFRM, I could look for potentially one more, but I don't necessarily find anything too great on the scan. If anything was good, I would probably have to say it would be this like little riot position over here. I think this one is going to be finally good over $11. So, um, if you look at the hourly, guys, it's just a really strong hourly resistance. And then we did start breaking lower high structure on this spot right over here. And this is technically your short-term break of structure, which we did get the retest and a strong close off of. So that's actually like our low a day. So if we do get a push higher and it's above 11 bucks, I might take some lottos there tomorrow or a legitimate trade on like next week or 2 weeks out. I don't know what Bitcoin's doing, but doesn't really matter right now. Market isn't open and I don't care yet because I don't have a position. I don't like to crowd my brain with things that are irrelevant to me. I like to focus on where I know I can make money with a clear cut, thorough plan. And that's just going to be my plan moving forward here. So, yeah, nothing too special there. Nothing too uh, entertaining, but sometimes boring is kind of what helps you really it really does help you out. So I don't know, we'll see. I have the 35 call for tomorrow on AFRM and then um runners on my what's it called? Fucking oh, what am I saying? Schwab and Google. So yeah, we'll see how those go. Um, yep.